For those that just joined, thanks for joining us today for this webinar about grid services opportunities in Duke Energy in North Carolina. My name is Tony Vernetti. I'm a senior trainer here at Enphase Energy. I'm going to be the facilitator of today's webinar, introducing you to the concept of grid services briefly, and then I'm going to pass the mic over to Steve Lasher, who's head of grid services for, I think, about half the programs in the country. He's a key player here at Enphase in terms of like working with utilities and sometimes third parties to make sure that we can offer an easy way to sign up for grid services and maximize the benefits for homeowners and for installers. And then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions throughout today's session, please use the questions tool of GoToWebinar. Just click the little triangle next to questions and type your questions in there. Sometimes we can pause during the session and answer your questions. If we don't worry about that. We'll answer them at the end of the session. And if we, for whatever reason, don't have the answer for you today, we'll get back to you by email in a day or two. Sometimes these programs, we have a certain level of information when we first launch the program, but we do learn things as we talk to the folks that run the programs at utilities and learn about what your experience is actually trying to sign up for them. So, again, we'll try to get answers to all of your questions today or soon after. Brief overview of today's agenda. We're first, like I said, just going to talk about the concept of grid services and why you should be interested in working with Enphase Energy specifically when selling systems and signing your customers up for grid services programs or helping them to sign up. Steve's going to give a really detailed overview of the program, including program requirements, how to apply for the program, and additional important information. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need in order to become a certified Enphase installer and the various types of free training and education that we offer. So actually, before I jump into why Enphase, there might be some people on the line that are new to the concept of grid services. Grid services is an umbrella term for utilities when they make agreements with homeowners who own energy storage devices, most commonly battery systems, where essentially you're allowing the utility to send a signal to your battery to instruct it to discharge. It could be discharging just to the loads in the home, or in some cases even exporting energy from the battery back to the utility grid. Utilities can benefit financially from basically allowing, getting access to the energy in your battery because it helps them avoid buying more expensive electricity from certain types of power plants and any number of other reasons. But as we all know, the utility grids can oftentimes become stressed when power demand is very high. And this is a way that they can take advantage of stored energy to reduce stress on the power plants and the utility grid. So it's a win-win for the homeowner and for the utility. They both get something out of it, and we all get a more stable utility grid, which is a good thing. So now let's talk about the advantage of working with Enphase. First, both Enphase IQ batteries and microinverters are already grid services ready, and they have a lot of advanced grid functions which help with grid stability. System owners are able to use their battery in the operating mode of their choice. If you're familiar with Enphase systems, we do have full backup, savings mode, and self-consumption. So you can leave it in whatever mode you want, and when the grid services program signals a program event, it's going to just temporarily override that operating mode, use the battery, and then revert back to the normal operating mode once the event is over. We've worked really hard at making the homeowner experience best in class. With the Enphase app, the owner of the system can very easily sign up for and also manage their participation in the grid services program. If their home is in an area that's prone to power outages, they can set a reserve capacity for their battery so that their battery doesn't get completely depleted during a grid services event. It'll always have some energy in the battery in case of an unexpected power outage. Enphase also offers 24-hour a day, 7-day a week customer support. You can actually call our customer service number any time of the day or night from anywhere in the world and get a hold of a real human being within a couple of minutes. I can tell you from being in this business for a while, that's extremely rare. And it's an example of how Enphase works really hard to provide excellent customer support for our homeowners and for our installers. Our batteries have 15-year warranties. That's not just for the 5P battery, but also for the previous generation batteries that were installed after, I believe, July of 2023. Now, benefits for installers. Installers who have helped their customers to sign up for grid services can use the Enphase installer portal, also called Enlighten Manager, to monitor their customers' batteries during events. We offer, as I mentioned, a lot of free training to our installers for sales training, design, and installation training. We have online courses available at Enphase University that are all completely free, and that is also how you get certified, and I'll go over some of those details a little bit later. And we also have numerous on-demand and live webinars available on our website at enphase.com/events. So I encourage you to check out that page to watch additional webinars like this one today. And we also have a training channel on YouTube that has a lot of short videos on more specific topics. So if you want to learn how to, there's lots of different topics, but some little more technical topics where we have 4 to 5 minute how-to videos, check out our training channel on YouTube. We also offer free hands-on training at several regional training centers around the country. In order to find out when the next training is that's in your region, please reach out to your regional sales manager with Enphase, and they'll be able to tell you about upcoming training opportunities near your location. And lastly, I do want to highlight the Enphase website does have a dedicated grid services page. I'll make sure to put a link to that page in the chat here that has information about all the different programs available through Enphase. We're focusing on one program today, the Duke Energy battery program, but we do have other programs in other states. So if you're with a company that operates in multiple states, I encourage you to check out that page and see if there are other grid services available with Enphase equipment in other locations. All right, with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Steve Lasher, who's going to give you an overview of this exciting program.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so I'll go through the summary of the program, talk about incentives, and then we'll get into actually how to enroll in the program. I'm going to cover both. There's kind of two programs here. It's quite a complicated program overall, but it's very lucrative, so it's kind of worth figuring it out. So hopefully we'll help you with that, and maybe you'll help me too if there's some nuances that we don't fully yet understand since we're just launching the program. So overall, the program consists of sort of a PowerPair upfront incentive pilot, which is limited to a certain number of customers. And then there's the what we call battery control program, and that's sort of the umbrella name because there's two different names for it depending on which Duke, North Carolina utility the customer is a part of. So for Duke Energy Progress, it's EnergyWise is the name of the battery control program, and if you're a Duke Energy Carolinas customer, it's called Power Manager. So we kind of have these almost three programs, honestly. It's different ways to participate. Tony, can we go back to that previous slide? I think you're on a different screen now. I'll keep going while Tony works on the slides. So the overall purpose of the program really is to get more solar installed, to get more batteries installed so customers can participate in grid services programs and also have resiliency and renewable energy. There are battery control events that are called as part of what we call grid services program, which is the battery control portion, is going to provide a ongoing bill credit to the customer, whereas the upfront incentive that's part of PowerPair is really for incentivizing both solar and battery installations. So we'll go through some of the incentives in detail in the next slide. PowerPair is only for newly installed and eligible solar plus battery storage customers. So you can't get the solar incentive if you just install solar, and you can't get the battery incentive if you just install batteries. You have to install both, and they both have to be newly installed. They can't take advantage of this if you're a legacy customer. But if you are new, if you're installing new, customers get a very lucrative upfront incentive up to $9,000 per per site. And then the other kind of second program here is the battery control program, which PowerPair customers can sign up for, and also existing eligible residential battery customers. So if you have customers out there who installed, a few months ago or a few years ago, they can still take advantage of battery control program, which provides monthly bill credits to customers for their participation in these battery control events. So real quickly with PowerPair, kind of how it works is there is a DERMS provider, that's a distributed energy resource management system partner or provider, and in this case it's Energy Hub. They're a third party, and we collaborate and work with Energy Hub to ensure that when Duke wants to discharge a battery, they can do it, or when they want to get data from our batteries, they can do that. So there's sort of a third party that we work with in addition to Duke. For PowerPair, you have to be a Duke Energy trade ally. So if you are not and you'd like to be, there's some links at the end of this to help you go through that process. There's still the ability to participate in battery control if you're not a trade ally, but if you are a trade ally, you can also participate in PowerPair, which is that upfront incentive. As part of that, once you're a trade ally and the customer is interested in installing new Solar Plus battery, you put in an application, you indicate whether the customer wants to participate as data only, which means no monthly bill credits, and they only share data with Duke, or whether they want to be a battery control participant, in which case Duke would discharge the customer's batteries from time to time and the customer would get the monthly bill credits. Once that sort of application for the PowerPair incentive is in place, it's a reservation basically for that incentive. If that is accepted by Duke, then the customer can enroll through their Enphase homeowner app, and we'll walk through that enrollment process at the end of the presentation. That exact same enrollment process will apply to the battery control program. So battery control, if you're a new or an existing battery customer, you can enroll in that. That's all done to the Enphase homeowner app. And as I mentioned before, that's where Duke can discharge the customer's battery from time to time, actually any time throughout the year, summer, fall, spring, and winter. In fact, there's more events in the winter than any other season. So they're really looking for different types of battery control than we've seen in other programs where they focus on the summer peak. Duke would like to focus on all times of year and look at different use cases for controlling the batteries. We go to the next slide. So I tried to break it down and make it a little bit simpler. Oh, Tony, would you be able to use the latest version of the presentation? If you can get that up for us, I'll continue to speak to this.
Yeah, let me. I can try to close this, Steve, and reopen it, but this is the same. This is the shared file, so it should be the same, unless it didn't update on your side.
I just sent one over, yes. Someone over this morning that had some updated information.
Okay, well, this is what I have. Let me just close this and try to reopen it.
Okay.
And
no worries.
That'll fix it.
Okay. Well, anyway, we'll send over the updated presentation. And basically what I was indicating, I realized I should indicate this morning, is the first two of those programs listed are the PowerPair upfront incentive program with either data only or battery control. And those are available for customers to enroll in now. They were able to enroll starting June 20th. We launched the program. The third program is if you are an existing battery customer. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. I just added that top little couple lines there indicating that third program where it's battery control for an existing customer, they're not participating in PowerPair. That one we don't have in place as of today. We are on a very limited basis. We can enable enrollment for customers. If you are really itching to get someone enrolled in that program, you can email us. And there's some email that you can use at the end of this, and we can get them enrolled. But right now we're trying to hold off until the end of the month when we'll have an automatic integration in place with Energy Hub so that we can more quickly get customers enrolled. And so we're waiting for that to happen by the end of the month. So at the end of the month, any customer that you have out there that already has a battery that wants to enroll, they will be able to seamlessly do that. They'll have a in-app experience that will be enabled for all battery customers in the Duke territory, and they can go in and enroll automatically by themselves without any support. In the meantime, just reach out to us via email and let us know if there are any customers who want to enroll right away. But ideally, they would wait until the end of July, and we could just do all that automatically with them through the app. These are, again, are the 3 programs that I kind of mentioned before. There's the first 2 are sort of PowerPair. The first PowerPair is sort of a data-only participation. The second one is PowerPair plus some kind of a battery control participation, either Power Manager or Energy Wise, depending on the utility. They have 2 different types of riders that they will be put on based on that. So for data only, it's more of a time of use rate rider. And for the battery control, it would be more of a standard, and they call it a net metering bridge rider. Eligibility for both of those are for new battery customers, solar plus battery customers. They must have both. And the incentives, both incentives include the one-time upfront incentive, so for the solar system and the battery system. And then for the second program, it also would include monthly bill credits for participation in the battery control portion of the program. And as you can see, the first program, all they have to do is share data. That's done automatically. There's really nothing that they should see that's different. They do have to enroll in the program and agree to the terms and conditions, which basically say, that you can have access to your battery data and give that permission, and they can enroll and get the upfront incentive. The second program, they would also need to participate in the grid services events, which are the discharge events, and in some cases involves charging as well. So we'll call that battery management events. And there are going to be between 30 and 60 of those per year, according to Duke. And with that, they get the additional monthly bill credit on top of the one-time upfront incentive. The third sort of participation level is if you don't participate in PowerPair because perhaps you are existing battery customer and you don't qualify, you can still participate in battery control only. In that case, the same applies as the second way to participate, which means you would need to be on the net metering bridge rider, and you would get the monthly bill credits, just not the upfront incentive. And again, same deal, you have to participate in 30 to 60 battery control events per year, and everyone has to share their telemetry data. So that's basically so Duke can see how the batteries are being used, so they can help better design the programs going forward. I go to the next slide. Okay, a little deep dive into the incentives. As I mentioned, the upfront PowerPair incentive is up to $9,000 per site or per customer. That's a combination of 36 cents per watt for the AC system, up to 10 kilowatts AC. And that's, that's really based on how big your solar system is. So if you're installing for a customer, you'll want to keep that in mind. If you go over 10 kilowatts AC, then they're not going to compensate you any further, but certainly if that's what the customer wants, it would make sense to install a larger system if the interconnection requirements are still met. And there are some pretty interesting or stringent or unique interconnection requirements, which you all probably know quite well, but if you do have questions, we probably have an FAE on the line who could answer them at the end. And then in addition, you get we get $400 a kilowatt hour for how much battery is stored, up to 13.5 kilowatt hours. So for Enphase, that means, at 3 5Ps, if you install 3 IQ battery 5Ps, you'd be maxed out, and anything above that, you'd also be maxed out for that incentive as well. And then you can see for battery control portion of the program, the ongoing monthly bill credits, what you would get for different battery configurations. For one IQ battery 5P, it's $17 a month, and then it kind of keeps going up from there. For 3 of them, it's $53 a month, and you can install 4, you get more. So you can just keep going higher with these levels. I'm just showing you 3 kind of typical monthly bill credits that you could expect. And then in terms of the incentive payment itself, really Duke Energy is responsible for that. We enable the customer to participate in the program. Duke is responsible for really administrating the program and for paying customers. But Duke will have to verify the interconnection is, interconnection approval is, and you have permission to operate, so PTO, and they have to make sure the customer is under the right rider. And I think once that is all done, they should either get a check from Duke for the upfront incentive, or in the case of battery control, they would get the monthly bill credits. So no clear guidelines on exactly how long this would all take, but it sounds like if you get approved into the program and you enroll, then once you are told, or once the customer is told that they are approved and enrolled, the next billing cycle, is my understanding, they would start to see the monthly bill credits. And I'm not sure exactly how long the checks would take to go out for PowerPair, but probably I would guess in a relatively timely fashion. We'll see how it goes. I'm sure Duke is it's quite an aggressive schedule for this program, and we'll just have to wait and see how quickly customers start getting those checks. But we're hopeful that it won't take too long. We go to the next slide. This is some illustrative examples for the incentives. The first table is for the PowerPair upfront incentive, and you can see for 7 kilowatts of AC versus 10 kilowatts of AC, which would be maxing out the incentive, what the various upfront incentives would be depending on the size of the battery. So you got the 2 variables. You get some incentive for the solar, some for the battery. You can see at the end there, you kind of max out at 15 kilowatt hours of battery and 10 kilowatts of AC. And then the second table is for the battery control program. Battery control program is going to be based on number of batteries installed only. It's not actually based on performance like some other programs that you may be familiar with in other parts of the country or may have heard about. This is sort of once the battery is installed and enrolled, it will be given a certain bill credit regardless of how it performs, but they're very stringent requirements for participation, so you can't opt out or miss more than 4 events per year. So that's pretty stringent. But if they are able to do that, customers will continue to get their monthly bill credits. You want to go to the next slide? And the next. So as you can see, there are some really significant incentives that could be available to customers. So we think it's pretty lucrative, and now we get into what the customer has to do in return. So first of all, the customer has to be eligible. So they have to be a Duke Energy Carolina or Duke Energy Progress residential customer with an active electric account in good standing. For PowerPair, again, this has to be a new installation, so installed within the last 90 days, and I think that's 90 days. You basically have, after you install, you have 90 days to kind of apply for this incentive, is my understanding, and then they can approve you for the program. You have to be a Duke approved trade ally, and you can apply online with the link here, and I think also at the end of the presentation there's an additional link. And this is limited. It's a pretty big pilot. It's 6,000 residential customers, which is an estimate based on the number of megawatts allocated to each utility. So 30 megawatts AC of solar each for the Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress. We don't know when that number will be hit, but we'll probably be okay this year. That said, I would try to get out there and get these customers enrolled and install solar plus battery as quickly as possible, so that we don't miss out, or customers don't miss out on the incentives. Another eligibility requirement is that the customer have the high-speed internet through Wi-Fi or Ethernet, not through cellular. So there are some customers out there on cellular only. It's a little bit unusual for battery customers, but they are out there, and we would not be able to support that for this program, for this incentive. They would have to have Wi-Fi or Ethernet connection. And then also, there's actually some clawback clauses to where Duke could charge customers what they call an inoperable equipment assessment if the Wi-Fi connection or the Ethernet connection was basically missing for a long period of time, or there are other reasons that the battery system could not be operated or data could not be collected. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, and we'll do everything we can to work with you to ensure customers have operable equipment and don't run into this issue. Go to the next slide. Now, additional requirements for PowerPair. So the customer has to commit and has to enroll through the Enphase homeowner app, which we'll show you toward the end. They have to own the premises where the equipment is installed. They have to comply with the interconnection standards, which includes sort of a 20 kilowatt AC export limit. And there are other requirements in the interconnection agreement that have to be followed, of course. As we mentioned, maintaining that internet connectivity and agree to participate for 10 years. So they can unenroll. They could basically drop out of the program, but they would have to pay a penalty. So not something that we would want anyone to have to do. It's an early termination charge, and it's basically a prorated amount of the upfront incentive. And it's also possible Duke could request to inspect and verify the equipment. Doesn't sound like they are planning to do that. At least that's not been communicated to us, but they do reserve the right to do that if needed. Event duration and frequency would be none if it's for data only. There's no grid services events, no discharge events for the battery, but they're just the data sharing. On the next slide, we'll talk about the battery control events and how frequent those are. For seasons, this is all year. Customers would be expected to deliver data and or also participate in these battery discharge events for the battery control participation. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so now that was PowerPair. Now for battery control, there's some additional program requirements. Again, this is the portion where the customers would get their ongoing bill credits for participating in grid services or battery discharge events. For those discharge events, the customer agrees to allow Duke to discharge up to 80% of their battery energy during each of the events. That means they keep 20% or should be able to keep 20% sort of in reserve in case there is an outage. The customers can opt out of the program, but we recommend they not opt out of any of, I shouldn't say out of the program. They can opt out of specific events, but we would probably want to encourage them to not opt out of events because if they opt out of 4 events and then they have some kind of a communications issue or some reason the battery cannot be discharged during another event, they could basically miss out on their incentives. So we wouldn't want that to happen. So we would encourage them to really stay in the program and only opt out if it was, pretty significant reason for wanting to do so. And for this, they agree to participate for 1 year. Duke doesn't want customers to switch back and forth between riders, so they're supposed to stay in this for 1 year. After 1 year, if they wanted to switch to data only, they could do that, or vice versa. They could be in data only for 1 year and then switch over to battery control. If they're not in PowerPair at all and they're just in battery control, it's an existing battery customer, same applies, just 1 year of participation is expected. And they could continue to participate as long as the program has continued to be offered, which we don't know exactly for how long, but would likely be something like 10 years. Some variation of this program would probably continue for a long period of time. The events themselves, which are the battery discharge and actually charge events as well, would be between 1 and 3 hours for any given day. And there'd be about 30 to 60 events per year. So for about 30 to 60 days, there might be a 1 or 3 hour event. And it could be really any time of the year. It could be actually more likely to happen in the winter, according to the information provided by Duke. They expect as many as 18 events in December through March. They wouldn't call any on weekends and holidays. And just note that the events could include, or actually will include, pre-charge events, meaning that the battery is not fully charged. We are required to put the battery into full backup mode, which will charge the battery up in preparation for the discharge event. So Duke wants to try to make sure they've got 80% of the battery energy capacity for each event. That's why we are required to put the battery into full backup mode to get it charged up for the discharge event. We'll go to the next slide. Great. Second page of requirements for battery control are the battery settings. We want to talk about this a little bit more detail. We mentioned the 20% reserve, which was called the battery minimum discharge limit. That's what we call it when it's a grid services limit. So 20% can be retained by the customer and 80% would be expected to be delivered during these events. As I mentioned, the battery will be set to full backup mode. It will be set to that 12 hours before the event. So if the event is meant to discharge at 6 p.m., then starting 6 a.m., the battery go into full backup mode, meaning the solar would prioritize charging the battery. And if the battery is not fully charged, then the battery would not be fully charged by solar. It could be charged by the grid as well. Storm Guard will be overridden during all events. So anytime Duke calls one of these events, the 30 or 60 per year, the Storm Guard will not prevent that battery from discharging during the event. So Storm Guard will be overridden just during the events. Duke does promise not to call the events during major storms that could result in widespread outages. The reason we do that is Storm Guard is pretty sensitive. It can prevent batteries from discharging even during heat advisories, and that's likely to be some of the types of times when Duke would want to discharge batteries for grid services. Usually heat advisories and many of the Storm Guard events or weather alerts do not result in outages, but they can, certainly some of the big ones. And basically Duke is saying, for any of the big major weather alerts, we're not going to call events. So that's their promise in exchange for allowing the customer, allowing them to override their Storm Guard. And then the battery will revert to its original settings after the event is complete. So after basically the event is done, it's going to go right back to Storm Guard is active. It's going to do what it normally does. If the customer has a battery reserve capacity that's higher than 20%, it will go back to that, and it will only switch back into this mode of when events are called. Go back to the next slide. And the next. So this is how we apply. First, we'll talk about PowerPair, and then we'll get into battery control. For PowerPair, there has to be a reservation application filled out. This is all better. You're better off going to the Duke website and looking into this. I summarized this from the Duke website, the Duke PowerPair website, maybe a month or so ago, and they basically want to make sure everyone has the most recent information. So please refer to the Duke PowerPair website for exactly how this should be done. But my summary is basically that the installer will, once you've designed the system for the customer and it's been installed, and you have actually you don't have to have it installed yet, but once you have designed the system, you can go in and do the incentive reservation application. You just have, I believe, 90 days to kind of make sure you get everything done. You have 270 days from the date of notification of the incentive to install the equipment. So you could go in, put in this reservation application, get approved, and then you have 270 days to actually install. So you don't have to do the install first. You can apply before you install. When you do this interconnection and when you do the reservation application, you need to select whether you want to do data only or battery control, and that's really probably more up to the customer. We would think a lot of customers would want to do battery control because you get that extra incentive, but certainly some customers may not want their battery to be discharged or managed in any way, and they might just select data only. Duke does reserve the right to kind of switch people around if they wanted to be in data only, but they didn't have enough battery control participants. They might only approve them for the battery control portion. I doubt that this will happen too often. At least Duke says they doubt this will happen too often, but it is possible, and they reserve the right to do that. And then customer will receive the PowerPair incentive reservation or be placed on a waiting list. We don't expect the waiting list to be a big deal currently, but it could be toward the end of this period when they're running out of the funding for the pilot. And then finally, the customer would then go in and once they're, I guess, installed, and they would submit the required documentation to Duke. And again, this is all outlined in more detail in the Duke PowerPair webpage, and I encourage you to kind of familiarize yourself with that, as this is just a summary and it may not be the most up to date. Go to the next slide. This part is the most up to date. This is our part of this program where we set up a way for customers to easily enroll in either battery control or data only participation. So right now, what we're doing is when we find out that there's a new battery and solar system installed, we're enabling this customer experience in the Enphase homeowner app where the customer can enroll. In that, what we do is the customer can go, they'll see a new widget called Grid Services, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then they can go in and enroll. And we'll walk you through the steps, but basically they go to Services, Grid Services, select their utility, select program, sign up for free, go through a few quick and easy steps. All the details that they need to provide are auto-populated. They would just need to make sure that it is consistent, that information like their name and address and email is consistent with what's provided to Duke Energy as the utility provider. So they may have to make some tweaks to that information that's pre-populated, depending on whose information is with the utility versus whose information is with Enphase in Enlighten. They will also be able to review, and they need to sign or at least check mark that they agree to the terms and conditions, both the terms and conditions for Duke and what we call a participation agreement for Enphase. So there's two different agreements that they have to check the box and agree to, and they should review. And then they can hit submit, and then hopefully it will take 4 to 5 business days starting at the end of this month. Right now, things are a little slower. The integration with Energy Hub is sort of is called a light integration, which isn't, everything is not automated, so we're seeing quite a long time between when we submit applications and getting approval back, but that should get cleared up in August, so hopefully we'll start to see much quicker turnaround soon. And then after all that's done, the customers will start to receive either their upfront PowerPair incentive and or their ongoing battery control bill credit from Duke. We'll go to the next slide. This is screenshots of what the customer should see. The first is all this is sort of notifying them about the program, right? They get a little pop-up that says, there's Grid Services program in your area. They can click Learn More. It kind of walks them through where to go from there. But if they click on Services at any time in their app, and then they click on Grid Services, which again, we're going to enable just for certain customers as we see enrollments come in, but eventually we will enable for all battery customers in Duke territory. Once they click on that, then they can go and select their utility or electric utility company, and then the program. And there's only one program that they can select. It's called the Duke Energy Battery Program, and that covers all of the kind of 3 programs we've been discussing on this webinar. Go to the next slide. Once they click on that, then they'd be taken to the next screen on the left. And as I had mentioned, it gives you a little bit of overview of the program, not a lot of detail. Doesn't really talk about PowerPair. It's really focused on, the either data only participation or battery control participation, and it's got a little summary of kind of what the incentive level is and the event frequency and that kind of thing. So just real high level, not much detail. But if they click on the FAQs, there's a detailed frequently asked questions document that has even more detail than we've been presented here in this webinar. And once they click sign up for free, then they'll be taken to this form. It's an application form for enrollment, and it's got all the pre-populated information, which they need to check, and they can change if they need to. And then they can basically sign it there electronically. It's electronic signature after reviewing the terms and conditions and the participation agreement. They hit submit, and then they'll be able to track the approval process in their app. And as I said, hopefully it will start to take 4 to 5 business days starting at the end of this month, but for now it could take a little longer given the more manual process in place currently. Go next slide. And if you scroll down on either of those screens that I just showed, there's more information. So if you scroll down on the first screen, it tells you a little bit about what kind of battery, what the program discharge event would look like and what some other events look like. If you scroll down on the pre-populated application form, you can see where it asks for electric utility number. That's probably the only thing I believe that is not pre-populated at all. So the customer will have to find their bill. There should be an informational there that describes how they can find it on their bill, but most customers already know. But we were not given a screenshot of the customer bill from Duke. They didn't have one, so it's really just an explanation of how to find the number, not a visual, unfortunately, but hopefully it's pretty straightforward. Once all that information is in, they click next and they keep moving forward. I think that's good. We can go to the next slide. And next one, real quick, there's additional user experience in the app. Once they're enrolled and approved, they can look at events, they can see ongoing upcoming events, they can see their history. So if they clicked on history and then the second screenshot there clicked on a month, and then the third screenshot, they would see the different events in the month and kind of how long they lasted and what their performance was like, just if they're interested. The next slide, Tony, is going to be how they would opt out. So they would be able to go to upcoming events, and then they have a little option of opting out. Again, we don't encourage this in this program because of the rules around not having more than 4 opt-outs a year. But if they really wanted to, they certainly could opt out. They'd opt out of this individual event. They would ask to confirm, and then once they confirm that, it would say opted out, and they could opt back in as long as they do so before the event. Okay, the next slide. This is my last slide. Just some additional resources. So we'll have a PDF of this available after the webinar. I think it'll come to you through maybe an email. And you can click on any of these links to learn more. There's some good information. There's a lot of information because it's a pretty complicated, it's the most complicated program, I think, in the country, but it's also the most lucrative. So probably worthwhile to make sure you're familiar with it. Click on any of those links for more details. And there's information about interconnection requirements and riders. And then there's PowerPair specific information, including how to become a trade ally. Actually, that's not here. So if you do want to become a trade ally, there's a link in another slide earlier on. I thought that was here, but it's not. So you'll have to find that link. But there's lots of information about how to help with the reservation application if you need it. You can call or you can email Duke, and they're pretty responsive. And then there's Enphase specific information, our Grid Services webpage, which will have the Duke program soon. It's probably going to be, in August. We've been trying to get that live before the end of the month. If all goes well, we will. And then that will have a lot of these kinds of details, plus additional details about the program that you can send customers to, or you can review if need be. And then if you ever need any support, actually I have a different Grid Services email, which I'll correct, and we'll send that out to you guys afterwards. I think that's it for me, Tony.
All right, thank you, Steve. This is a really exciting program. And we've been doing these Grid Services webinars for different programs across the country for, seems like a couple years now. And this is significantly larger incentive compared to your average grid services program. So hopefully our installers on the line are as excited about this as we are. For those of you who are on the call who aren't yet certified to install Enphase systems, we provide free online courses through Enphase University. You can go to this website right here, university.enphaseenergy.com. In order to become a certified installer, you have to take the Enphase storage installation course. Each individual that's going to actually commission systems using the installer app or installer toolkit needs to be installation certified. And at least one person of the company needs to be design certified as well. Not everybody, just one person of the company needs to be design certified. We also offer a sales certification. That's just optional to encourage your sales team to get fully up to speed with the Enphase product offering. Again, not required for commissioning, but it is there in case you want your sales team to get become more knowledgeable about Enphase products. And here, this slide is going to be included when we receive, we're going to send a PDF of this to you in a follow-up email that you get from GoToWebinar within a day or so. So you'll be able to get these slides and easily access these links and email addresses and so forth that are listed here. All right, now I'd like to open it up to a Q&A. We have a tool in GoToWebinar for questions. Just open that up and type your questions in. We don't have any questions typed in now, so please go ahead and take advantage of that tool. And while we have Steve Lasher on the line here to answer your question that you could, we also have FAEs, field application engineers, on the line from Enphase Energy. So if you have any technical questions, perhaps about the Enphase Energy system, we can answer those today as well. So one more thing to mention here, we are going to make a recording of this webinar available on the YouTube training channel, and we'll share a link to that in the follow-up email as well. So if there are other people that work at your company that you think would benefit from this information, please forward the link to the video recording to them so they can watch it. Okay, a question came in from Carl. So it looks like I addressed your question, Carl. You're asking if you can get access to the slide presentation and the recording. So yes, you'll get an email, follow-up email from the webinar software within a day that'll have links to both the PDF of the presentation and to a recording. So just look out for that email. All right, well, we're not getting any additional questions. Steve, you mentioned that the grid services email address might not be correct. What is it not? Is it gridservices@enphaseenergy.com? All right, not getting, I'm not sure if Steve is online or maybe he's just muted.
I'm sorry, I was muted. It's actually grid services. Yeah, sorry about that. Grid services support@enphaseenergy.com. So I can I will update this presentation with that, and we can when we share it out.
Okay, great. I was just going to let people know if they have any additional questions that they'd like to ask, which email address they should use. So you'll get that in a follow-up email, but if you are online listening, it's grid services support@enphaseenergy.com. Okay, good question came in from Dana. What if a customer has solar and then adds a battery? Will they be included in the PAIR program?
My understanding is no, they cannot participate in PowerPair if they add a battery. It has to be new solar and new battery installed, unfortunately, but they can still participate in the battery control programs, which is either Power Manager or EnergyWise.
All right, well, we'll just wait another moment here to see if any additional questions come in. All right, well, we'll just accept that as a last question then and go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Hopefully this was a valuable session for you. And again, if you have any additional follow-up questions, use the email address gridservicessupport@enphaseenergy.com. And we look forward to seeing you at future programs, or excuse me, future webinars. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you.